Howdy friends, today we're doing another audiobook review with me, Eston Walden, and let's get to it. Okay, so I just finished a great book. It's called The Fifth Realm. It is in the 10 Realm series. That's not ultra, innovative, but the book itself is. It's written by Michael Chatfield and narrated by Todd Menesses. 90% sure that's right. Okay, summary. Book got a 4.86. Narrator got a 4. The overall was 4.58. And so that's a pretty stellar rating for a book. The narrator did pretty good. And overall, feel like it went pretty well. So let's dive in. Starting with Uniqueness. So Uniqueness got a 4.5. I was a little bit conflicted about this because the book itself doesn't touch on a topic that is specifically unique. Is what I find unique about this book is its combination of genres. So it takes the literature RPG world, and it's not just like someone's playing a video game. It's the world itself is using game mechanics. Okay, so I'm a fan of that. I feel like you get a little bit more uniqueness and reality whenever you mix those two things together. But it's not just that. Let's see here. We also have military strategy. There are wars, battles, combat that happens, and you get to hear the planning and the structure and the goals. And so that's fun. That's going to have a whole nother audience that's going to bring in. We have town building or city building, and so you get to see how they're structuring a civilization, how they're planning for what comes next, where they want to grow, how they want to govern. That's a whole nother thing. And they also have crafting. So crafting is a fun thing to incorporate into these books. Some literature RPG books have them, some of them don't. Some of them focus on fighting, being able to bring in crafting and fighting together, I feel like is very fun. And this world takes a pretty unique approach to crafting development. Like in your first couple of stages, it's very similar to how it is in other books, but the higher stages are more tied to like what we think about in the educational world, where when you're in your master's and PhD, you have a theory that you're trying to prove. And that's what it's all about. To get to the higher levels of crafting, you have to be able to create your own views of the world and experiment on those things. And so this book is pretty fantastic because it mixes all of these in such a way that it feels like it should be that way. It's not like you're trying to force these little bits and pieces together to talk about as many different things as you can. It feels like something that makes sense in this world. And so because of the seamless crafting of all of these things together, I think that is what makes this a 4.5. I have a hard time giving books a 5 on uniqueness just because like what is unique, for this book it takes in from so many different genres. I almost gave it a 4 because it is just like all these different genres. But the way that they're put together made me bump it up at least a half point. So you can take or leave it. And then the next categories are all 5s. So starting with character development. The whole goal of the 5 realms is to become better, stronger, either in crafting or in battle or in resources. And the main characters are growing in all of those things, right? And so in this book, they do become stronger. They learn more spells, they learn more about how the world works, they dive deeper into their own, cultivation of magic and the human body. And so they make growth in all of these areas. I wouldn't say it's as much as we've seen in some of the other books, in the sense that like in previous books, the characters focused a lot on their own growth. And in this book, they focused a little bit more on city building and military planning, which helped them grow, financially and as far as resources go. which is very important to get to the higher realms. You see a lot in this book that people having to rely on other sects or other, groups to help push them forward. And essentially this book is them consolidating their base so that they can push themselves forward, right? But that's not to say that they don't grow stronger or smarter, or because they do that too. And so that's why I gave it a 5. Even though their personal development didn't grow as much as it did in previous, they grew a lot of their resource base and a lot of other things that are going to help skyrocket them into the future, I think. Secondary characters. Okay, so this is a big pet peeve of mine. A lot of books, so this book was like, I think 30 hours long. I'm literally looking it up right now in front of you. That's right. 26 and a half. So when you get into this like 25 plus range, books have a tendency to have this idea that, okay, well, my book is huge, so I can talk about side characters for as long as I want to. I can have entire chapters devoted to, X side character and another chapter devoted to another side character. And I hate that. I personally hate that. Everyone's gonna feel differently about this topic, I'm sure. But for me, side characters are for bringing in comedy, for bringing in different perspectives, for talking about what's happening in the world around you. It is not for, spending, whole chapters with them. And so I feel like this book is perfect when it comes to that. So if you're looking for, as an author, a book to look at to get this right, this is the book. If they spend a chapter on side characters, they hit literally every side character in that chapter. They spend, 5 to 10 minutes on each one talking about, almost like an update, like a report almost on, but like from their perspective, what have they done? What are they going to do? How are they growing? And then they move on. Because when you're listening to a book, you are wanting to listen to the main characters. You don't want to get, behind or blindsided by other things that are happening in the world. And that's why you bring in these side characters, and they're fantastic. And this book does that. You hit them and then you leave, and you get to your main characters and watch them grow. And it's fantastic. So 5 out of 5 for that. Sorry for ranting. Then we go on to magic system. So magic system, also a 5 out of 5. One thing I really like about this magic system, so it's in a literature RPG world, so there's one pitfall that a lot of them fall into, and that's that everyone is, pigeonholed or standardized into like a particular thing, right? You might have your main character do something special or miraculous, but everyone else is pretty much pigeonholed into their own categories. And this magic system has a little bit more variety than that. And so one thing it does is like, okay, yep, there are these different stages, and that's cool. Everyone can, try to get to these different stages of mana or body cultivation. But the thing that's interesting is the way that you get to those stages matters. The way you cultivate your body can give you, we'll call them perks. And those perks are going to be different depending on what you did. You might not get perks for getting, a particular level of body cultivation, because you didn't go through the same thing that this other person did. And so that adds a little bit of flexibility to it. And because the magic system affects mostly everything in this world, I mentioned this earlier, like the whole crafting approach, I lump that in with the magic system because the way that you craft is magical. Like you are incorporating mana and other things into your crafting, and so it's not just like a physical thing, it's now bigger than that. And so I would say the magic system is very well thought out. The author does a good job of revealing things as the book goes on, so there's more things that you learn from the perspective of the main characters, which makes it feel like a bigger revelation. It's not things that you're like, oh yeah, we already learned that, you know. It's fun. The characters, they learn conceptually something, and then they experience it, and it brings a whole new revelation to the audience, which I think is great. So 5 out of 5 for Magic System. Now we'll get into where the book goes down a little bit. It's not horrible, but we're going to get into the narration section. Narration is a hit or miss in a lot of books. I would say that the narrator in general did a good job in the series. Both categories I gave them a 4 in, which is above average, right? And so that's good, but not great. And the reasoning so, let's start with dynamic voicing. So dynamic voicing is all about, you know, getting to feel how the character feels from how the narrator portrays their voice. And so for this book, it was very hit or miss. It was like some sections the narrator put, you know, work into to make it where you could really feel how the main characters felt, and then sometimes it didn't. And it's really hard to describe that other than how I just did. Sometimes it just felt like the narrator was expressing themselves as they realized they needed to as they're reading the book. And the reason I feel that way is there were specific sections in the book where there was a pause in a sentence, and it was evident afterwards that there shouldn't have been. That there was like a natural cadence that the narrator had, and it did not flow with the sentence structure, and that added a little bit of confusion. And so, you know, kind of because of those two things, it took you a little bit out of the story, and that's why I gave it a 4 out of 5. In general, the narrator did have some tones that helped bring out how characters felt. It just wasn't consistent, and so that's why, you know, it's a 4. General good job, just not a 5. Similar thing for vocal cast. So one big thing for the vocal cast is that when the main characters are talking to side characters, you can tell that they're different. The main character has very distinctive voices, both of them, and you know who they are when they're talking, which helps because they come from Earth. I mean, we're at book, I don't know, 5 it's 5th realm, right? So probably book 5. So they should sound different, right? So that's good. The problem is that when you look at the rest of the characters in the world, sometimes they sound unique and sometimes they don't. And I feel like there are so many side characters that the narrator ran out of voices. When I listened to this book, that's the impression that I got, was that sometimes he reused voices from some characters to other characters, such that when I heard them, I was confused as to who was talking, with the exception of, you know, the narrator actually saying the name of the person that was talking, right? I couldn't just tell from the voice alone because it sounded like someone else. And I found that happening to me multiple times. And so, I don't know, like I can't really fault the author for having too many, you know, characters in a book, right? That's not his fault. And the narrator did a good job of trying to come up with there's like, I don't know, 20 different voices that he uses in this book. But it just didn't feel like it ended up being enough. And so, because of that confusion, I had to give it a 4 out of 5. Once again, did a great job, but there was some lack there. And so I couldn't give it a 5. Okay, and now we're getting into like some of the side things that are not, they're not added into the rating system. We have age. I would say high school and up. You probably could do middle school, but there is a fair bit of violence and war that happens like in this series. Some spy games type situations, betrayal, and And I don't know if that's beneficial at a younger age. When you get into high school, those kind of concepts, your brain's a little bit more developed. And so you can think about those and rationalize to yourself, like, oh, is it good that they have war in this place? Or is that like, or is war okay? You know, those type of topics. So I would probably reserve that for like a high school student or above. And I really don't remember if there was any bad language, which usually means there wasn't, but I'm not gonna swear to that. I would say the book is very humorous. It does have serious parts, but I would lean it towards the humor side of the spectrum. Romance, there's pretty much none in this book. There has been some in previous books, but none in this book. In fact, one of the main characters has a tendency to bring up his past relationships, kind of discouraging the idea of being in one. So we'll see how that goes. There's two main characters. One of them might not. We'll see. Action. I mean, it's a book that's all about action, and so there's a lot of crafting, but like over 50% of it is fighting. And gore. I don't really think there's much gore at all. I would say there's very little, if there's any at all. I just keep trying to reflect. When I was writing down my notes on this, I couldn't come up with anything, and for this amount of fighting as there is, it doesn't really get into gory detail, which is pretty good. I don't feel like that's necessary sometimes. I've seen it used well to show like the depravity of like a particular individual, and how you could use gore in that way. There's other ways to do it, but and then on to the experimental category, which I still have not put a rating system on, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. But engagement. So engagement is a new category I've added, and that's because recently I read a book that was 30 hours and then a book that was 9 hours, and they were both good books, but one of them the 30-hour book, I found myself wanting to listen to less often than my 9-hour book. The 30-hour book I would listen to, and I would get distracted and want to do something else. But the 9-hour book, I didn't want to do anything but listen to that book. I was fully engaged. And so I feel like there's something else here that I'm not covering by my other categories. And so engagement is kind of that category that I'm experimenting with. So for this book, I would say it's a high engagement. Probably at least a 4.5 out of 5. Some parts of it were a 4. It's a big book. But it was very engaging. Like, I did not really want to do anything else. I would go do chores so that I could listen to this book and not be bothered. Clean the kitchen, do laundry, whatever, so that I could listen to this book and not have to do anything else. And so I would say it's a high engagement book. And that's it. In summary, book was a 4.86, narrator was a 4, the combination was a 4.58. It's almost a 4.6. And it was great. I highly recommend this whole series. I feel like the characters are very real, and come from a place of reality, in the sense that, like, it almost feels like the author knows these characters, knows people who are like them, and are writing it, from those perspectives. So yeah, that's it, and that's Audiobooks with Eston. That's your review for the 5th realm in the 10 realm series. So we, in theory, have 5 more to go. And like, subscribe, leave comments in the chat. As I already said, I think there are things that I am not accounting for in this rating system, and I would love to hear what you guys think that they are. I'm always up for improvement, and so feel free to put a comment, and that's it. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.